Hello, fellow peacemakers. Welcome back to another episode of Make Peace Not Beef. I'm not going to number it because I don't know which one this is going to be because I keep saying the wrong number. Like I was like 35, but then it comes out at 36. So you know what? I'm just not going to say it. And today we have a very special episode. I know I say that every time, but I promise you today we're going to have a very special episode because today I'm going to be interviewing one of my listeners, Julia.
Woohoo!
All right, I'm going to be asking Julia a bunch of questions as to, what she thinks of my podcast, if she likes my voice or hates it, all the questions you probably are also curious to know because, she represents one of you guys. So without further ado, I want to introduce my lovely listener, Julia. So Julia, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how did you discover my podcast?
Cool. Yeah. Hi, everyone. And thanks so much, Lily, for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited to be here. So I can, give a little bit of background and then talk about how I found you. I was recently at Google for 6 years. And I was working in partnerships, but mostly within the advertising industry. The kicker, though, is that I knew pretty much as soon as I joined Google that I wanted to get into sustainability or working on solving for climate change. And so long story short, in middle of 2020, I decided it was finally time to make that career pivot. And so I ended up leaving Google in January of this year, 2021. I decided to give myself a couple months off and take a sabbatical and really get clear on which area of climate change I wanted to go into. And as of now, this is about 6 months later, I'm very happy to share that I have found my next role working for a food waste focused company. So definitely happy to talk more about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
That's
much.
huge.
Yeah. So I start in mid-September and this is definitely the most fun part of my sabbatical right now because I know I have a job lined up and I'm just fully enjoying the last 4 weeks of it. But yeah, in terms of how I found you, Lily, so after I left Google, I was just spending a lot of time studying on my own about the different solutions to climate change and looking for cool people to meet. And I discovered this community called Work on Climate that's on Slack. And actually, it was through your podcast that I realized was founded by 2 ex-Googlers. I didn't know that at the time that I joined. But I joined this awesome Slack community, just was looking at the different posts and whatnot. And I think I just stumbled on a post that you made, Lily, and you had maybe introduced yourself or your podcast. And so I clicked into it. I was like, oh, Make Peas Not Beef. Like, what a fun name, right? And I just kind of tabled it in my mind. And I think it wasn't until a couple of weeks later I went and I started listening to some of your episodes. And I was like, holy crap, this girl is awesome. Like, I love everything she's talking about. I resonate so much with the concept she's covering. So I sent you a message on Work on Climate, just very much like, hey, I would love to talk to you and meet you. I think you're awesome. And pretty much, that takes us to where we are today.
I know. By the way, that message really made my day. I was like, holy crap. One of my listeners actually reached out to me and she actually listened to my podcast and you gave me such amazing feedbacks. You made me feel so good about myself. Like I desperately needed that ego stroke.
Oh, Lily, I'm so glad.
Yeah, no, but honestly, Julia just, I came across her message and she seemed like a really genuine and lovely person. And she's like, hey, I listened to your podcast. By the way, I work at Google. I'm like, okay, so my listeners are clearly way smarter than me. I hope I know what I'm talking about. And then Julia also told me about all the cool sustainability initiatives that she was heading at Google. So I'm super, super excited to have her here. I feel like she's way more knowledgeable and qualified than me on a lot of sustainability related topics. So yeah, I'm excited to pick her brain on those topics.
I would absolutely beg to differ, but you know what? We're learning from each other, which I think is the whole point of this conversation and the climate movement altogether, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And here's the thing though, like I remember in your message, you said like, I could sense the enthusiasm in your message. You were like, I feel like you're my long lost sister, right?
Honestly, Lily, I was so excited. And I think we'll talk more about this, but your episodes on stoicism and sort of your perspective on just climate change and how you approach it from a personal level resonated so much with me. And your focus on educating people as that sort of being like the biggest form of action that you take is also kind of how I approach my climate journey as well. And Yeah, absolutely. Like agree with you, on the long lost soul sisters piece. It's like we just have so many things in common.
I know. We have many things in common. The only thing we don't have in common is our location. And I'm not sure if I want to move to New York. Otherwise, I'd love to. I'd love to meet you in New York. I'll be in the States next year and I'll definitely go visit you. I'll give New York another chance.
Absolutely. It
Don't
deserves another
disappoint
chance.
me. Yes, the Big Apple. Definitely for Julia. I will. All right. Well, so Julia, first question for you. What do you think make peace not beef means when you first saw the name?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love puns, so I obviously was very entertained by the name. I mean, I think my first take on it was the, cook peas, not beef, like the vegetable food sort of translation. And then obviously, as I found out later on that you were vegan, I was like, okay, that makes perfect sense. But I'm also a big fan of vegetables. I love plants and all of that. So I was very drawn to the name there. And then I think as I've gotten to know you and your philosophies more, understanding that the make peace, not beef is also a play on just making peace with the world and not making conflict, right? And yeah, that's really cool that how you combine those two aspects together into one name that sort of showcases you and your entire sort of persona.
Wow, you've articulated that perfectly. More eloquently than what I could have ever described it. So like
it's because I listened to your podcast, Lily.
Yeah, you know my podcast better than I do, clearly. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Yes, I love puns. And a lot of people, when they first look at Make Peace Not Beef, like, oh, it's a vegan podcast. Like you said, cook peas, not beef. And it's true because when I was brainstorming podcast names, I was kind of going along with that theme. I wanted to make sure veganism was part of it, but then I'm like, well, first of all, make peace not beef rhymes, and also, peas and beef. It just so happens to be. Isn't that kind of cool? Like peace and conflict, but then literally beef, like cows are responsible for so much greenhouse gas and methane. Yeah. So, like.
Yeah,
I think I'm pretty genius, not gonna lie.
It's a great name. It's extremely catchy. And I think I did know it was a climate podcast. Like I didn't get it confused with a vegan podcast because I believe when I found it, your little icon was a picture of you with the planet as like the little cartoon of the planet with an arrow pointing to it that said my mother, for anyone who missed it, because Lily's icon is now different, but it was hilarious. So, another reason why I was like, I have to talk to this girl.
Yeah, that's my podcast. That's my profile picture on Slack, and also my podcast, also my profile picture on Clubhouse. I don't know how I came up with that. I'm like, I want something funny and like catchy so people will notice me and it will catch people's attention. And then I made that. Yeah, with a little arrow pointing to it that says my mom. I guess it worked because you saw my post. So. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, thank you. And you've described the name of my podcast perfectly. It's a pun on eat plants, not meat, and also make peace, not war. Perfect. And also, out of curiosity, do you usually watch my YouTube videos or do you listen to the audio version on Spotify?
I usually listen to the audio version. To be honest, I'm not a big YouTube person unless I'm like watching a tutorial on something. So yeah, I'll just put on one of your episodes, like if I'm walking around the city or doing errands or what, chores around the house or whatever. So that's my go-to.
It's okay. I'm pretty ugly. You're not missing out on much.
Lily, you're gorgeous.
Video. I'm kidding. Nightmare inducing if you watch at night, especially because I have a bunch of crazy facial expressions. See, I didn't even know that until like I play it back, and then when we're editing videos together, my video editor and I, we like go through the footage. I'm like, holy shit, why did I make that facial expression? That is hideous. Oh no. I probably just embarrassed myself 50 times already on this episode.
I think now I need to go watch the YouTube videos because I don't think I've ever noticed.
No,
and you're never hideous, please. Like,
wow. Yeah, you might be surprised by what you find. So I'll just, be careful. You might want to stick to the audio version. I'm glad. I'm good.
So in any format that you consume Lily's content, she is entertaining. We'll just leave it at that.
You're so sweet. Julia's the best. I need to start giving out awards like Best Listener Award, Most Patient Listener who has continuously listened to my podcast, Smartest Listener, Prettiest Listener. I'm going to start making certificates.
Superlatives, yeah. We can all wear sashes during the interviews.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, you get Miss Universe treatment. or Miss Planet, I guess.
Ooh, love it.
But I'm still the dopest chick on the planet. You can be the second dopest chick on the planet. What do you think of that title of mine? I didn't come up with
I love it. No, I absolutely love it because I did listen to your interview on someone else's podcast where you got that title. And
Right.
you were, honestly, I think you were a bit less formal in that interview than sometimes you are in your interviews.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but I love seeing your personality come out. Like you were so badass. I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. This is real authentic Lily.
Thank you. Yeah. And for listeners who are wondering which episode she's talking about, so I was a guest on this podcast called Generation Us. And yes, there I talked about, my work as a climate activist and a bunch of other crazy conversations I had. But the only thing was that one was a remote podcast. So the audio quality is a little bit compromised, but you should definitely go check it out. I did do an Instagram post with a little audiogram on my page, so you can go check it out. Yeah, it was a super fun episode. Like you said, that is definitely not the kind of persona I project on my podcast, but like it's rare. So definitely go check it out. And I appreciate the kind words, Julia. So more questions for you. Are you ready?
Yes, hit me.
So what's the biggest thing you've learned from listening to my podcast?
Ooh, I think one of the most interesting ones for me was the Bitcoin episode because I was not expecting your response on it, where essentially you were outlining the reasons why Bitcoin mining could be good for the environment and create more demand for renewable energy sources. And I feel like my impression of Bitcoin up until that point is just draining, all the energy and going to keep increasing our usage of fossil fuels. So that was fascinating. So I really liked that because it was an alternative perspective I'd never heard before. And I've recently started dabbling in investing in Bitcoin as well. So I was like, okay, so I'm not ruining the environment by trying to make some money here.
Well, to be completely fair, I don't know, what's backing the electricity generation for your Bitcoin miner. So it could still come from coal plants, but definitely I wanted to present at least, the potential of Bitcoin to scale renewables, because if the global demand really soars, then right now renewables are the cheapest source of electricity. So it only makes sense that miners are incentivized to find the cheapest source of electricity to mine the Bitcoin. But yeah, I'm glad. It's funny that was one of my top episodes, I would say, actually.
Ooh, cool.
Episode. And then someone gave me a thumb down on YouTube. Who gave me a thumb down on YouTube? How dare you?
Reveal yourselves.
Yeah, whoever that person was clearly did not pay attention, or maybe they're just a hater, or they don't believe in climate change, or they believe that Bitcoin is evil for the environment. But honestly, I feel like when it comes to technology, there really isn't good or bad. It all depends on how you use it, right? Like even for gasoline. Even for gasoline cars, I mean, for people who hate on, I mean, I talk a lot about gas cars, but, it serves a purpose, right? It gets us from point A to point B, and it has significantly made our lives more convenient and shortened the distance between people. So it does provide value, but, at what cost? So
Yeah, I would say, every technological innovation was created at the time to make people's lives better without necessarily knowing about the downstream effects of it, right? Like even GMOs were made because it thought it would solve global hunger. So it's just more like once you know if something is negatively impacting the planet, then let's do something about it. But you don't have to shame the technology or the inventions that came up with it in the first place, because it did probably lead to a lot of benefits for the world based on what we knew at the time.
Totally. And, you brought up such a good point with GMO. I believe it was called the Green Revolution, right? That's when this American farmer came up with GMO. And yeah, that literally saved millions of people from famine. Like we could have died if it weren't for, this agricultural boom and the invention of GMO. Like there's no way to feed the planet without it. And so you're right. I'm absolutely grateful. I mean, even with plastic, I hate plastic so much, but it's true. Like without plastic, too bad that we're overly reliant on plastic, right, in our lives. So we gotta. But at one point, it was invented for convenience and portability and all this stuff. So
and it led to the rise of the middle class and the standard of living as we know it today. So it is what it is, right? And I mean, I think this overall gets into your thoughts on stoicism as well. And I kind of feel like that, where I'm like, it is what it is. Like where we are, we got here based on how the world progressed up until this point, and it's not necessarily good or bad, but here's where we are, and then let's act from this point we are now. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, so no reason to, hate on plastics or gas cars. Like, they brought what they brought, and then let's see how we can make that better.
I love the way you framed it. You should be my co-host. She's my more eloquent other half. Yeah. Okay, so juicy question. What do you think about me, your host? You can be honest.
Well, Lily, if I'm your more eloquent other half, you are definitely the more fun other half. I think like I love how unfiltered you are. Actually, some of your solo episodes are a bit more refined, and I feel like sometimes it catches me off guard because like I'll be listening to your interviews and you're just having so much fun on them, like we are on this one, and you're super, super authentic, which I love. So I think that's incredible. I think like your enthusiasm speaks volumes. I think it's so important to keep that level of like positivity and optimism and energy, especially in the face of a crisis so big. And so I really, really love like just the perspective that you bring to, everything that you're sharing on your podcast.
You're so sweet. I'm crying. I'm like blushing and crying at the same time. It's so sweet. You're so kind. Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. My solo episodes are more fun because I like script them, but for interviews, it's more spontaneous. So I know I sound very different on solo episodes versus like interviews like this. But
it's so cool to see all the different sides of you, right? Because like sometimes the more refined ones, like they're not better or worse, they're just different. It's like, oh, okay, like now if I want to listen to a little Lily monologue, let me pull this up.
Yeah, exactly. Ready for some philosophy. That's what I call it. Lily's philosophy.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Right. I was gonna make
that should be your tagline for Make Peas Not Beef.
Whoa, like a one-word tagline, philosophy. I was thinking of printing that on the reverse side of my tote bag, actually, like philosophy, wise words that come out of Lily's mouths.
Love it.
That's my next tote bag design. Get ready for it.
I love it.
Thanks so much. You're so kind. And yeah, you're right. I mean, at first when you said like I'm unfiltered, I'm like, damn, is that a bad thing? I hope I didn't say anything that offended anyone. But yeah,
I think you would know by now if it was a bad thing, but you definitely wouldn't have fans like myself if it was a bad thing. So no, Lily, you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing.
You're so sweet. Just give it to me all day. Like this stuff really makes me feel good about myself. You know how to talk. Good. You should be a podcaster. Consider it. Like yeah, I was gonna ask you if you thought like, is my voice weird? Am I too dramatic? I was hoping for some like, uncensored feedback.
No. I mean, no. I think your voice is great. I think, one thing that's really cool about your voice is that
I sound like a man.
No, you don't sound like a man at all. No. I would say, so here's the thing. Your English is absolutely perfect, but you have the slightest bit of an accent, like just enough for someone to know that English is not your first language. But I think that's amazing because it's like when I listen to you, like you speak English, better than a lot of native English speakers, but like someone's listening to you while also knowing that you learned another language before English. And so I think it just gives a hint to people that you have a super interesting life story, which I learned about, I think through one of your solo episodes, but also the one where Cass did the reverse interview of you. And it's like, you have a fascinating life story, Lily. And I think like that, it more and more of it is revealed as people listen to your podcast episodes. But I would say, your eloquence is really, really impressive. And like the way that you carry yourself spontaneously through even the interviews is, really amazing.
Says the more eloquent person herself.
Well, but the thing is like, I think maybe I call that out because I relate to you a bit because English isn't my first language.
It isn't?
And
I can't tell.
No. But the thing is, well, so I was born in China and I moved to the US when I was 3. And when I started grade school, I didn't know any English. And so I was in ESL for the first year or two of when I was in grade school. And I do think that for like the large part of the first part of my life is I sort of struggled with it. And I never felt like I was that good of a speaker. I never felt like I was a good writer. Like I started writing a sustainability newsletter in the past couple of years, and that has up-leveled my writing skills tremendously. And I talk about that in one of my episodes. I write this sustainability newsletter called Trash Talk. I can, do a little plug for it later.
I've seen it. By the way, she's an amazing writer. Don't believe any of this that she says. She is amazing. She's just very humbling.
No, but what I'm saying is like, I think I took it on myself to really master these skills because of feeling self-conscious about it earlier on in life, right?
Mhm.
And like the fact that I am, you know, as you put it, an amazing speaker, like I'm not going to categorize myself as that, but like it comes from a lot of practice and comes from a lot of dedication. And I think like also you being a really eloquent and impressive speaker comes from you expressing yourself and hosting this podcast, right? And putting all of the work into that. Like it's not, you know, some people are born with it, but I think most of us, it's something that we put work into. And then the results of that work is reflected, but sometimes the work itself isn't totally obvious. So that's just all a very long way to say, like, I am really, really impressed by what you do. I really admire what you do because I think maybe I also know a little bit about, you know, all of the effort that goes into it.
Wow. I am just amazed by all these subtle observations that you've made and pointed out. Like things like you said, see, like every time I listen to my own podcast, like I recognize, I like, oh, there's a bit of an accent. I can hear it when I play it back, right?
Yeah.
But then you see, like these are like small details that no one else has ever reflected back to me. So it's just so fascinating to hear you being like open and honest with me about this. Like, this is so cool. Like I noticed it about myself, but I didn't know that other people also, I mean, obviously people notice it, but you
But
notice it
it's
enough to bring
barely
it up.
noticeable. You know, it's barely noticeable. Like, and again, like you speak English like a native English speaker, but it's
Appreciate it.
also just enough to know that you also speak something else.
Which is, see, Jesus, you're so good at this. Like you framed my accent in such a positive light. You're saying, oh, it makes you sound cultured and like exotic.
But it is.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, you're incredibly observant and perceptive. This is crazy. And you're absolutely right. Like there's so much work that goes into this podcast that often go unnoticed because people don't. And with your sustainability newsletter, because I've read some of your articles on Medium and I love your infographics. By the way, Julia is also an amazing artist. She created all these, like these are all like hand drawn, right? Or is it digital drawings that you do?
Yeah, these are the ones that I've published so far, digital drawings that I made on my cell phone with like a $10 stylus. And then I started like, I tested out this drawing app on my sister's iPad and I was like, holy crap, I have to get an iPad because it's just so much more responsive. So those are the crappy draft versions. Like there'll be better ones coming out, but thanks, Lily. I've been making art for most of my life, sort of on and off. And I've really been trying to figure out, I would say for the past couple of years, how can I combine my interest in art and my artistic abilities and also lend that to something climate related, which is obviously what I'm really, really passionate about. So I've started drawing little climate cartoon infographics to go with some of my newsletter posts, and it's been fun.
Yes, and I love that spaghetti diagram that you made with the plant-based meatballs. That was
Thank you.
brilliant. That was brilliant. You're so creative. And see, this is what's so unique about you, Julia. Like I'm also a writer, but I can't draw the same way as you can. So I have to use someone else's infographics. But when you incorporate your own infographics into your articles, like people pick that up, right? It's like it's your style. Like you're like, oh yeah. That's Julia's style. Like it's so cool. It's what defines your like, yeah, your brand.
Thank you. Wow, that's so exciting. Yeah, I'm building a brand.
Yeah, I feel like the infographics are just as valuable as the writing itself. Not saying the writing isn't good, but it's like, you know, it goes well with you. And whenever I see your drawings, I'm like, yeah, this is an article written by Julia. It's part of her brand. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's the goal, right? To, you know, just to make all this information accessible at the end of the day. Same as what you're doing.
I love it because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And sometimes I skip, like I skim through articles and I only look at the important diagrams. So it's great that you have that skill.
Yeah. Woohoo. Thanks.
Okay. So let me ask you, which episode is your favorite and also your least favorite? I want to hear both.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. So the Bitcoin one's obviously up there. I loved the one where Cass reverse interviewed you because it was one of the first ones I listened to. And like I said, just got a lot of context on your story, which is awesome. So props to Cass for having that foresight too, for being like, let's interview Lily and learn more about her. Obviously she's incredible. So for anyone who doesn't know, she is one of the founders of the Work on Climate platform. So it's like, okay, like two badass, powerful women here. This is great.
Hey, you're the third one. Join the gang. Let's make it a trio. We can be Charlie's Angels.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. Asian edition.
Yeah. Charlie's Angels here to save a burning planet.
Yeah. Do it. Well, who's least
Yeah, I also love some of the episodes where you talk about your philosophies and just sort of like what made you who you are. Like I love the one with your mom and just learning more about your mom being this amazing feminist Asian woman, which I was like,
Oh yes,
wow,
the one on feminism.
incredible.
That's
Yeah.
also one of my highest rated ones. And I said that in
Yeah.
the episode. I'm like, if my podcast ever blows up, it's probably because of this episode, and I manifested it like that one. It's got a lot of
Yeah. So, I mean,
listen.
you know what you should do, Lily? You should interview your mom in one of your episodes.
I do, but then I have to translate the entire thing into English. And I could do that with like
Oh,
subtitles. And
okay.
right now she's suffering from this like throat condition, so she can't really talk right now. She's
Oh,
sick.
okay.
So yeah, unfortunately, I'd love to interview her. She's a fascinating individual. Very different
She
from
would be amazing. Yeah. So I love all of those. I mean, I don't really hate any of your episodes. I would say, there's maybe like some that I check out on. I think I mostly come to listen to your episodes on climate. So I know that you have a couple episodes that are not so much focused on that. I don't really pay attention to them, but other people might get a lot out of those. Sorry, that's just my honest thing. And I really come to your episodes to learn. So I think like I look for the ones with interesting titles where it's like, oh, climate change, like solved via, XYZ method, right? I think there's just so many different creative ways that you can solve for the climate crisis. And you do a really good job of highlighting all of the different people involved in different ways. So those are more the ones that I gravitate towards. So.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And I try to keep it diverse and relatable because different people relate to different aspects of it. And the funny thing is, so for listeners who don't know, Julia actually introduced me to Ivana, the sustainability entrepreneur that I interviewed recently.
Yeah, Ivana's amazing. I'm so glad you guys had to catch up, and I'm so glad you guys hung out in person in Toronto, because
thank you so
that was my
much.
ultimate goal. I was like, you guys are both there. You should definitely be friends.
Yes, and you know what? All three of us should hang out in New York because she also loves New York. I mean, she lived in New York.
Yeah.
I'm the only hater here. What's wrong? Yeah. Well, you two can take me out to like.
That would be so fun.
We're gonna explore New York again. I'm kind of dreading it already, but no, I'm sure it's gonna be fun. Your apartment looks amazing, so I have faith.
Thanks. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's crazy how like you and Ivana both worked at Google and you kind of followed like a similar trajectory, right? Did you tell us about like your relationship with Ivana a little bit?
Yeah, no, it was super funny because I don't think either of us knew that we were leaving Google when we did. So she left, I think at the end of 2020. She left maybe like 2 months before I did. And she sent out a note saying she was leaving. And I messaged her and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm also leaving. I just haven't told anyone yet. So that was crazy. So like we also have been on very similar paths. So we both started in the ads, like in Google Ads, so working with advertising partners, but we were on different teams. We didn't really know each other that well. And then we were both working with advertising agencies and like part of the same broader org. And then when I moved to New York, or no, at one point, so I transitioned to a different team, and then she also ended up transitioning to a different team, but again, within the same new org. So it was like kind of funny because we were just transitioning from one side of ads to the other. But when I moved to New York, she had already been in New York for a while. And I was sitting at lunch one day talking to one of our teammates, like, within our org, about how I really want to work on climate change. And he was like, oh, you should talk to Ivana. Like, she's really passionate about that. And at that point, I didn't even know Ivana was interested in climate change. And I knew that she was really interested in fashion. So I was like, oh, like, is she interested in climate change, like from the fashion perspective? And he was like, no, like, she's just interested in it overall. And so we head back after lunch and she's at her desk, and I just went up to her and I was like, hey, Ivana, I heard that you're really passionate about sustainability. Like, I'd love to talk more to you about this. And she was like, I think she was literally sitting at her desk putting together this presentation for this newly formed community called Gringlers. So at Google, we call employees Googlers, and then Gringlers was this new community that was formed, and there were these different regional chapters. And it basically was a new sustainability community for Googlers who were interested in, green initiatives. And so she was literally putting together the slide deck, and she was one of the founding members. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. And like, we're, putting together this group. We have our first meeting next week or so, like, you should join. And I was like, I would love to join. And so I go back to my desk, and later that day, or maybe the next day, she sends me the slide deck she'd been working on. And there was a slide in there of like the core team members with like different people's photos. And she had just put my face in there.
Oh,
And it
so
was like,
cute.
oh my gosh, I guess I'm part of the core team now. And so I was so happy, and I will always be grateful to her for inviting me into that. But it's just so serendipitous. Like, it was right after I moved to New York. It was right when I was like, okay, I want to start focusing more on climate. And then like a simple conversation led to, me getting involved in this community, which I was involved in for basically 2 years. And we ran so many cool initiatives, like met so many awesome people as a part of that. Um, and so, for anyone listening, it just goes to show you, like, definitely talk about the things that you're passionate about, because then doors will start to open for you. And it's kind of magical, how things just start to align. But yeah, that's how I know Ivana. And so we both worked on Gringlers together, and like we've pretty much stayed in touch since then. And, since we've both been on sabbatical, so like checking in and just seeing how each other's doing. But it was great to hear your interview with her and just to get more context on what she's building with seaweed as well. So yeah,
I love
I
that.
love this community.
Yeah, this is crazy. And you know what? That just gave me an idea. Like, does Google currently have climate tech incubators? Because it seems like so many people that came out of Google eventually went into the climate space.
What's really cool is, yeah, so Google has a program called Google for Startups, and they recently created, like, basically what Google for Startups is for. It's an accelerator for startups. And so different startups can apply, and they get access to Google training and funding and et cetera. And they recently created a branch of Google for Startups that were specifically working on sustainable development goals. And so it's a newer initiative. And I forget, I think it's like 10 to 15 startups right now are going through this program. I believe it's a 6-month program, might be a bit longer. And yeah, they go through this incubator, and like the companies that are in it are awesome. I think there's one in Europe that I know is in it. It's like Climate Farmers, I believe, was in the EU branch of it, but they have, different incubators for the different regions globally as well.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was also talking to you. Remember, I'm not sure if you remember this from the episode I did with Cass and Eugene, but Eugene was talking about how there's like a couple of hundreds of projects in the graveyard at Google.
There
Right?
probably are. Yeah. I'm not as familiar with that, but I would imagine with all of the brilliant ideas that come out of there that, there's quite a few that sink to the bottom, and the rest that develop and rise to the top.
And I think it's so great that Google is able to harness all the talent, like the human capital, because you're right. I mean, there's so many, like literally Google is like the congregation of all the like brightest people on the planet. So if anyone's going to come up with solutions to climate change, it's probably there. So it's good that they have this accelerator program to kind of channel that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, and just to lend their massive wealth of resources to
Yes.
entrepreneurs that are trying to figure this out, right? So that they don't have to start from scratch.
Exactly. And like if you want a co-founder, just go find someone at Google. Like they're all smart. Google has already vetted their intelligence and like caliber for you, which is freaking amazing. That's awesome. Okay. Well, another question for you is, how did listening to my podcast impact your life or shape your understanding of climate change? And did it inspire you to take any action?
Yeah, I think like what inspires me is just you really focusing on education. Um, I think one of the things that can be challenging for people that start to really care about climate is finding like-minded people who also care and finding their communities. And I feel like I took it a little bit for granted, or maybe, I've just always like sought out communities. And so it's like, yeah, like I had the community at Google, and then I had the work on climate Slack group. And like, I'm just always looking for people that care about this to talk to. And so it was really, really awesome finding you, because I think, there's so many different ways to solve for climate change. And like, even within the climate community, sometimes you might feel like, oh, there's not really someone like me if I'm not an entrepreneur, or I'm not a policy, advocate, or I'm not like X, Y, and Z. And in finding your podcast, I was like, oh, like Lily's really focused on education. And like, I'm also really focused on education. And I love like how she educates people. And I think it just made me feel maybe not so alone in like the way that I'm approaching how I'm responding to climate change, because I know there's things I'm good at, and there's things that I'm not good at, and things I'm naturally drawn to, and things I'm not. And so, I think it's just like finding the people that you, first of all, can resonate with their passion as well. That's really, really important. So you don't feel alone in this enormous fight. And then second of all, just like finding people that are walking that same path as you within climate itself, and just learning from them and being inspired by them. I think like talking to you and then talking to someone else within Work on Climate as well that had started a climate newsletter. I had started my Trash Talk sustainability newsletter when I was at Google, and I was only publishing it internally. So obviously it ended once I left Google. And I was sort of wondering if I was going to restart it at any point. And I just like didn't really know. And I think it was, being inspired by you, talking to someone else who's also writing a newsletter, and then just like sort of being immersed in this space. I was like, you know what? There's more people that need to learn this. And
That's right.
yeah, and I can continue spreading this message. And so a couple months ago, I decided to relaunch the newsletter, which is why now I'm publishing it on Medium and sort of adding to it, and adding additional dimensions like the climate cartoons and whatnot, because it's just a reminder to share your voice in this fight and kind of to do whatever you can, right?
Yes, and I'm definitely going to attach your Medium articles in the show notes so that listeners can go check it out. Julia is an amazing writer, and she also draws these amazing infographics, so be sure to check it out. Like literally no one else in this world is able to do what you're doing. So it's so valuable that you decided to pick up writing these things again, because we need it right now, especially with climate change being such a complex problem. We definitely need those infographics to help people understand the severity and gravity of the issue.
Yeah. There are a lot of people doing that though. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm obviously not the only one, but I follow a lot of cool people on Instagram that are like amazing artists and digest this information. So maybe I should write an episode at some point like, hey, if you want digestible climate information, like here's the different social media accounts you should follow.
Absolutely. But I would not discount the value of your work because no one else thinks like you. Yeah. And I've seen your writing. It's really fantastic. And like you said, I'm equally inspired by what you're doing. And I think we need all forms of education, right? Like I focus more on maybe video, audio content, but we need writers because not everybody listens to podcasts, and we need to do whatever we can. And I used to think like, oh, as someone in the climate education space, is my work not as valuable as, say, an entrepreneur who is working on some carbon capture technology? But I would argue our work is just as important, because maybe people who listen to my podcast or people who read your articles, they could be investors. They might have capital, right? And now that they understand the severity of the issue, they might redirect their capital to the climate space. So we are indirectly funding all these entrepreneurs with our work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like the impact of education definitely shouldn't be discounted. And the reason that I got into the education space is because like often it feels like, oh, I'm just one person and me doing one thing, like how can it really how can it really change anything, right? It's like, oh, if I don't order takeout for like one day, who cares? Or like, if I, am showering, 5 minutes less per day, like, how does that really make a difference? And so it was, as I was like trying to figure out how to do more, like, first of all, I was educating myself. And then I was like, well, I can bring in more people into this journey if I start educating more people. And so as I was like continuing on this path of writing the sustainability newsletter, I sort of formed like my thesis around why I think education matters, because I think we all have to start somewhere, right? And so if you are educating yourself, like I call that personal education, I say that personal education leads to individual action. So you start to do something. That leads to community inspiration. Now you start teaching other people. Leads to collective organization. This is where you get into the policy aspect of it. And then that is what leads to planetary change, right? But most people don't just jump into political activism off of ground zero. Like you have to start somewhere. And so that's why I think education is so important for yourself and also for other people, because it just gives someone a starting point to like understand, why does this matter? Why should I care? Okay. And then you can start to learn, what can I do about it?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And the other thing I started to think about recently is like, you never know who's reading your articles or who's listening to my podcast. These may be ordinary people, but they could also be extraordinary people with extraordinary connections, right? These could be people working in politics or government work. You never know. And they might have connections that I would never dream of having. And they might have a level of influence way bigger than what I can do. So if like we could be potentially educating CEOs and venture capitalists on the topic, right? I'm not saying like ordinary people don't matter. Everyone matters, but you never know what kind of connections and power and influence your audience has, right?
Yeah, I love that. It's like the butterfly effect. You just put something out into the world and then what happens is what happens, but put it out there, right? Don't just sit on it.
Yeah, like maybe Bill Gates is going to read your article and he's going to be like, oh, this is great. I'm going to share it on Twitter. Like you never know, right? And who
Never
knows?
know.
You never know.
Let's put that out into the world. Let's hope Bill Gates reads my newsletter.
Yeah, or maybe like Obama's gonna read it, because I mean now he's no longer the president. He has definitely more time to be on Medium, and maybe he's browsing, and one day he comes across your article and then he decides to tweet it, and then now you have like 500,000 views.
Thanks, Lily. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Putting that energy out there, anything is possible, right?
Yeah,
love it. Love the way you answered that. Absolutely. So what would you like to see more of on my podcast?
Yeah. I think, sort of talking to like normal people, which is, I think, what both you and I, that's our intended audience. It's just people who don't know that much about climate change. I think it'd be really cool to hear more stories about people who didn't know about climate change and then transition into knowing about climate change and then doing something about it. I mean, I think like everyone has this kind of journey, but I feel like, or everyone who currently cares about climate change has had that kind of journey at some point in their life, right? But I feel like for people who maybe are very early on in their journeys or are just discovering why it matters, it can feel a little bit paralyzing to be like, oh my gosh, this issue is at such a grand scale. I don't even know where to start. And like, it's really scary. And I don't, think I can do anything. But the more I think you continue to feature stories from just everyday people, like you and like me, who have realized this matters and then takes those small incremental steps and eventually ends up at a place where like we are really dedicated to it. I think that path is possible for everyone. So I think that's one. I find relatable stories super inspiring. And then I think the other thing is I would love to continue to see more feminine leadership in your episodes. Like, I know you interview a lot of amazing women, but I really strongly feel that feminine leadership and women are going to be a huge piece of the puzzle to creating a livable future. And I just would love to like leverage your platform and my platform to continue highlighting these amazing women.
Oh gosh, I love everything you said. And absolutely. And I do realize that like in the past, I was looking through my episodes, I'm like, wow, a lot of my guests are male. And it was not like I was not intentionally interviewing male guests. It's really hard. I'm trying very hard to find, female entrepreneurs, leaders, educators in the space. Like, and I'd love to highlight their story, right? And not just like leaders, like just females in general who are interested in climate change. I definitely want to highlight their story. So,
well, I'm going to continue introducing amazing women to you because I think we all have to uplift and support each other. So don't worry, I got a couple on the list. I'm going to help you out there with that one.
Yeah, I love it. And I do have a couple in mind that I want to reach out to as well. And by the way, you brought up a really good point about interviewing people who are like not, or like previously did not believe in climate change, but then sort of transition.
Not even not believed, but maybe just didn't pay attention to it, right? Or didn't think it was important. Yeah, so, exactly.
Regarding that, do you know this guy whose name is Tim Denning? He's actually a pretty prestigious writer on Medium. He wrote a lot of articles about personal development. He's got like millions of followers on Medium. So he actually, so he's Australian. You should look him up, Tim Denning. Okay. And he wrote an article on how he used to be a climate denier. And then after seeing the Australian bushfires, he believed in climate change and he kind of encouraged people to take action. So I saw this article that he wrote a few months ago and I reached out to him and I asked him to be on my podcast to kind of share like, like what transpired between then and now that kind of shifted, right? His mentality on climate change, but he never got back to me. But Julia, like, I feel like you have an incredible network, and now that you're on Medium and you're going to be a writer, if you can reach out to him for me and connect us, because he's got millions of followers, and I feel like his story is going to resonate with so many people.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Link him this episode and say, hey, Tim, I talked about you in this episode. Can you please come on my podcast?
Literally, Tim, we are talking about you right now. I'm going to send this clip to him afterward.
Perfect.
Yeah. And, I also had another idea. This is going to sound crazy. I was on Clubhouse a while back. I joined all these Republican clubs because I purposely wanted to find a climate denier so I can debate them on my podcast, but not in a way that kind of disparages, like not in a way that belittles them, like genuine curiosity. Like, why do you not believe this is a thing? I genuinely want to have like a very even debate.
You know what, Lily, that's amazing. I absolutely commend you for seeking out someone like that. And I am of the same mindset because I have like a handful of friends on Facebook that share different views than I do. And like every so often I'll tell my boyfriend, I'm like, oh, so I stalked so-and-so's page again. And like, here's the different things they're saying. And it's just like, yeah, you need to be exposed to those different perspectives. Like
Yes,
you can't stay in your own little bubble. And
totally.
I don't think it's, I don't really think it's wrong for people to believe different things. I think
No.
even though to me, I'm like, climate change is so obvious, but what I always try and come back to is people believe what they believe because of the circumstances that they have come from. And I truly feel that everyone on this planet wants the best future for themselves and their offspring. Like, it's not like anyone's trying to ruin it for everyone else. I mean, maybe a
Right.
couple evil politicians, but we don't have to go there. But I do feel like most people are inherently good. So if someone is not, believing in this global crisis that we think is so obvious, I would love to hear why not and what it is that they do care about and what their perspectives are that, have them see it a different way than perhaps we do. I think that would be fascinating.
Absolutely. Actually, I think I suddenly remembered. Someone who was Candace Owens interview. Do you know Alex Epstein? Alex Epstein. It's this guy. I listened to an episode. I think he actually gave very good anti-climate change arguments. Sorry, not anti-climate change. He believes in climate change, but he's pro fossil fuels, basically. This guy.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of him before.
You've heard of him, right? He's a political pundit. So I listened to an episode featuring Alex Epstein. I believe it was on the Candace Owens podcast. Anyway, I purposely seek out like perspectives that are different from mine. Like you said, I agree. It's important to not stay in our own little bubble, because also if these are the people that we want to persuade, right? We want to be able to branch out. Oh my God, why are my coworkers messaging me at 9:10 p.m.? Oh shoot, my manager's messaging me. Oh shit. Okay. All right. Why? But it's 9:11. Okay, I'm gonna turn off do not disturb. What did he say?
I mean, check it. You can just edit this part out.
But it's okay. Actually, it's probably more authentic if we put it in. Guys, literally, like, I paused because my boss just messaged me at 9:11. I see their occasion video. Okay. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna deal with this tomorrow when I go to work. I'm literally in the middle of podcast recording. This is real life. Things come up. Sometimes your boss decides to message you like midway. I wonder if like my manager will ever watch this podcast recording, be like, I'm kidding. No, it's totally cool. It's totally cool. I'll look at it later. But what were we talking about again? Alex Epstein. Yes.
Yeah.
Alex Epstein. Yeah. So he's pro fossil fuels, and his argument for that was that he's pro human, and he's saying that like there's no way to completely transition to clean technology given our dependency on fossil fuels, like the current dependency on fossil fuel. Like I guess he's more of taking a practical standpoint. Anyway, he offers some really solid arguments that really made me go, like, this is interesting. Like he's not anti-climate change, but he's pro-human. He's saying humans are not the problem of climate change. He said we shouldn't shame humans, for consuming plastic and oil and things like that. So and he's extremely, extremely intelligent. I'm pretty sure he's, right wing. So, when we come across people like that who are intelligent, who probably have a master's or a doctor's, who probably graduated from Harvard or Princeton, how do you, go up against someone like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to check him out. That sounds very interesting. I'm like already, I feel myself in my head coming up with all the counter arguments to what you're saying about Alex Epstein's belief, which is fascinating. It's a good thing to notice about yourself, right?
Yes. I feel like as we're like, no, let me show you that you're wrong. But I'm like, wait a second. He's making some solid, sound arguments here. He's like, you can't just keep people in energy poverty. Like, as humans, we gotta live, unless we all want to go back to like living as caveman, right?
Right.
But
right.
And I kind of
get clean energy is so cheap these days.
It is. But you know what?
In my head, I'm like, that's quitter talk.
Right. But I understand his argument, which is saying like, we can't transition to clean energy overnight. I agree. I also just don't think it justifies us continuing to use fossil fuels forever. I don't like, no, obviously not. But it's interesting to hear a different perspective. Right.
Yeah. And I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it can always be those instances of a both and, right? Where it's, we do rely on fossil fuels. They're really important to human development. We can't get people off of them immediately and make them quit cold turkey. And we can also incentivize a fair and just and fast transition, which is something that we are not currently doing. And so you don't have to necessarily negate his argument in order to also argue that a transition to clean energy is important and necessary.
Correct. And that depends a lot on government policy and the infrastructure deal that was passed recently with some climate provisions coming up in the reconciliation bill. Yep, stuff that goes into Congress. But I totally agree with you. Absolutely. And just gonna wrap it up really quick because we're at an hour. So I wanted to ask you, you kind of talked about your sustainability journey from Google, and then now you found a new job like in the food waste industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fucking amazing. And I just want to say another big congratulations to you on that. It's so inspiring to witness, people transitioning their career to work on climate.
Thank you. And I'm joining this company called Afresh, and they're a startup.
It's Afresh. So you found this job opportunity on Work on Climate, right?
I did. I was just going to say this as a plug for Work on Climate.
Do the plug. I do the plug every episode. Let's go.
Yeah. No, and Work on Climate, again, amazing Slack group for anyone that's looking to meet like-minded people who care about this issue and trying to figure out how to solve it. I was just, as I was looking on how to meet cool people, I was going through the introductions threads and I was going through the I got a job threads and saw 2 people who had joined Afresh. And so I reached out to them and was like, hey, can I talk to you about this company? Ended up talking to one of the guys who's an engineer, had a great conversation. The other guy was actually the recruiter for Afresh. And so he was like, hey, your resume sounds relevant. I'm going to have you talk to our VP of sales. And basically it progressed from there. I'm so excited. Everyone at the company I've talked to has been awesome. And it's just so perfectly aligned with what I want to do. Awesome. I think I spent a lot of time during my sabbatical, figuring out which area of climate, I wanted to go into. And I landed on food sustainability. And then B, even within food sustainability, just trying to figure out, how to narrow that down. And I think because I come from a tech background, and I do think that technology is absolutely indispensable to solving for some of the challenges in the future. That is not to say that I don't believe in social justice and equity and all of those things. I have a very spiritual side, as we've talked about, Lily. But I think in the current, state of the world and in practical matters, technology can create huge impacts.
Yes.
So Afresh is leveraging AI to solve for food waste within grocery stores. And according to Project Drawdown, solving for food waste could be the #1 solution to mitigating climate change. And so just so excited with the alignment there of, what I wanted to get into and the impacts that we can potentially have. So super excited for this company and the direction they're taking.
Yay! I'm so happy for you. Are they based in Brooklyn?
No, they're based in the Bay Area. So I will be remote.
Very, very cool. For some reason, I feel like all of these food waste initiatives are based out of Brooklyn because I see you hang out with Wenjay a lot.
I do. Yeah, I will introduce you to Wenjay. Don't worry.
He's so cool. Okay. And for those of you who don't know who Wenjay is, she is this entrepreneur. Wait, she has an organic farm. Right?
So she's a founder, and basically she created this program called Local Roots. It's sort of like a CSA, but instead of just sourcing produce from one farm, she has done her research and talked to all these different local farms and sought out the farms that are practicing in the most regenerative way. And so every week I get 5 veggies, 2 fruits, and a pack of mushrooms. And it's different every week. It's all local. It's all regeneratively farmed. I actually found her as a customer first. And so this was during COVID when, couldn't go to the farmer's market anymore. And so everyone's sort of looking for different grocery delivery services. And I tried a couple different farm subscriptions and eventually realized that Local Roots was, the most sustainable in terms of my values and my ideals. And then I invited her to give a talk during an Earth Week that we were hosting at Google for Gringlers. And then realized that she was best friends with one of my best friends and did not know that. And so I was like, please introduce me. I want to be friends with her. And so, now we're friends, which is awesome. And you guys will be friends too, because you're both amazing.
That is so crazy. Wow. And how I learned about Wenjay? This is another crazy story. You know how I work at Vice as a software engineer? So I was literally testing the app. And as part of the testing, I had to watch a lot of shows and videos on the app to make sure everything is working.
Oh my God.
And then she was featured in a Vice documentary.
That is so cool.
Like
Oh my gosh, she's gonna
literally,
be so happy to hear this. This is
I swear to
amazing.
God. I swear to God. And she was talking about how, like, oh, hi, my name is Wenjay. I'm like this owner of this organic farm service, food delivery service from Brooklyn. And
Yeah.
then she was featured in the
Yeah.
Vice documentary, right? I swear to God, she is.
I don't think I've watched this full episode. I need to go watch it now, but I mean, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have her listen to this episode and she will hear that part and she'll be stoked. So I love it. It's a
Yeah.
really amazing small world when you start to like meet just such passionate people that are involved in this movement. It's like everyone knows everyone and everyone's helping everyone because everyone's trying to solve for the same thing. And I think that's just my favorite part about being a climate activist.
Yes, absolutely. This is so crazy. Yeah, the climate space is really small. Because like what Eugene said, like it doesn't matter if they're a celebrity because everybody wants to work on climate. So everyone's humble about it. You can literally reach out to anyone. Like I feel like my
Yeah.
next guest is going to be a Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. I'm rooting for you, Lily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be featured in Titanic Part 2. So stay tuned. I'm going to get a cameo there while I'm at it. Just
I mean,
kidding.
speak it into existence.
It's coming, y'all. I'm gonna become an actress next, and that's my career after this podcast. But just kidding. Sorry, the motorcycle's outside. So there was some noise. I had to put myself on mute. Okay, great. Well, okay, so I'm probably gonna wrap it up. We're at an hour, over an hour. So it's been a very, very pleasant and eye-opening chat with you, Julia. And I know we unfortunately we didn't get into spirituality. Perhaps I'll have you back and we're going to do a separate episode on that, on the feminine healing the planet. But I loved hearing about your journey. And I think it's just an inspiring story because there's so many people who want to pivot their careers, but they kind of feel stuck or they're afraid to leave their job and they're afraid to dive into the unknown. So can you just offer our listeners who are thinking about transitioning into a career to work on climate, like give them a tip or an advice, like how should they get started?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I think what holds us back the most is that climate feels like such a large scale problem that it's hard to know where to start. And then you start falling into this trap of anxiety, a fear, of feeling like, oh my gosh, like I said before, I'm just one person. How can I do anything? I would say just do one thing, right? Just pick one thing that you can do and start with that, whether that is educating yourself or signing up for a single climate newsletter or just researching, what does it mean to go zero waste, right? And like picking one small thing that you can do and starting there, because that'll eventually have a snowball effect. I would say where I'm at right now in my climate journey, I'm writing a sustainability newsletter and I subscribe to a local regenerative farm food supply, and I grow veggies on my balcony in Brooklyn, and I have reusable paper or reusable hand towels, like all of this stuff. This is not where I was even just 3 years ago. And so it's a journey for everyone. And it's just up to you what that first step is that you want to take. I think the harshest critic is always going to be yourself. So see where you can find self-compassion. And, I think the biggest thing that stuck with me that I've learned along this journey is that you can't be perfect in an imperfect system. So in addition to all of those things that I do, I still order takeout every once in a while. I ordered takeout for dinner tonight because, we had this interview coming up. I was too busy to cook, right? And I still buy things on Amazon from time to time. Like I am by no means a perfect climate activist, and you don't have to be either. Just do what you can and try and do a little more the next day and try and invite someone else in the day after that, and your effects will snowball from there. But don't be too hard on yourself is I think the biggest thing here.
I love that. And I have to agree with that. Like, you're absolutely right. I'm not a perfect climate activist, vegan, whatever it is. And no one, like you said, we live in an imperfect system unless, corporations can come up with a better alternative. What other alternative do we have? Right? That's
exactly
all the time. Like you can go zero waste, but how can you go zero waste when there are no zero waste grocery stores? Like everything comes in plastic. How can you possibly live without it? Right.
Yeah.
So you're right. But with education, we're going to mobilize the masses, and together, we're going to start to lobby for these changes that we want to see in our society. So
yeah. And then also, find your community too. I think that is the best form of support you can find. If anyone wants to talk about how to get started on climate change, like I'm sure either I or Lily would be happy to talk to you. Just, as we said about this community, it's so helpful. Just reach out to one of us. You can include in my information in your show notes, Lily, but like either of us would be more than happy to talk to anyone listening about how to get started here and just hear more about your personal situation and what you could potentially do based on your skills and talents and what you're interested in.
Yeah, totally. Julia and I are be more than happy to help you if you have any questions. Definitely, I'll attach your contact information in the show notes if you don't mind, because you're freaking awesome. And I'm sure a lot of people want to get in touch with you. After this show, they're all big fans of you. So, and they're going to go read your newsletter.
Thanks, Lily.
Oh, of course. Don't
Yes, go read my newsletter. It's called Trash Talk. It's a great title. So.
I love it.
There's my plug.
There goes your plug. We had many plugs throughout this episode with Work on Climate, Trash Talk. Alex Epstein was not a plug. That was genuinely me talking.
A Fresh is still hiring, I believe. So
a Fresh is a plug. A Fresh, a Fresh should sponsor this episode. You know what? I'm gonna go talk to them and see if they're willing. Anyway, yeah.
Well, I start in a month, Lily, so I'll be your in then.
You're gonna be my insider, helping me manifest that sponsorship. But yeah, it's really great. I'm so happy for your new job opportunity. And I feel like as you learn more about food waste and become more aware of it, you're going to teach us how to, like, maybe I'll have you back for another episode. Like, Julia, tell us all the ways that we can reduce food waste, right? In our day-to-day lives. Like, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be fun. Because I know you have some cooking themed ones as well.
I do.
I actually haven't listened to those. I cook a lot, but we could host a cooking show, Lily. That could be fun.
Let's do it.
Come to New York.
Oh,
come to
God,
New York.
No,
we'll do it in my kitchen.
I have to go back to New York again. No.
Or I'll let you know if I ever make it up to Toronto.
No, I'm just kidding. I'd love to go back to New York. I think you make Brooklyn sound like the most hipster place on the planet. It is. I mean, I've been to Bushwick. Like, it's really cool. I've been to Williamsburg. That's about it.
Yeah.
Wait, what's your favorite vegan restaurant in Brooklyn?
Ooh, Modern Love is pretty close to my house, and they have this amazing vegan mac and cheese. That comes with a tofu, like a breaded tofu cutlet. I'm also gluten-free right now, and all of it's gluten-free, but it's freaking delicious. I will take you there if you come, Lily. That'll be my my carrot.
I am totally going. I feel like American food is just sinful, like next level. Probably rich in calories, but at that point, I don't even care anymore.
No, but if it's vegan mac and cheese, it's good for you, right? That's what my favorite thing about the vegan diet. That's a
myth. Vegan food is not always healthy. Vegan mac and cheese.
My favorite thing about the vegan diet is I'm like, it's all plants. It's fine.
That's the biggest lie. Vegan cheese is sometimes more calorie dense than regular cheese. Actually, it's very, very processed. So like Beyond Meat burgers, you shouldn't be having that every day. And listeners, if you're having Beyond Meat burgers every day, you're doing it wrong. No, it's meant to be a treat. Whole food plant-based diet. No, but yes. I'm sure my listeners don't. They're probably like eating Doritos while listening to this, so they're not going to listen to me.
There's nothing wrong with Doritos. They're all delicious.
Wrong. They're delicious. Absolutely. American cheese, processed food, right? Good for the palate. It's bad for our health. But yeah, I'm definitely having that vegan mac and cheese. It sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Oh, can't wait. Yeah, I'm really excited to go back to Brooklyn. Actually, I have a feeling I will be back in New York. I have a feeling I will be back in Brooklyn, even though I did not have the best experience. And hopefully next time I won't need to buy a bunch of Uniqlo products and return them. Hopefully, please don't make
No, it'll definitely be better.
Yes, I'm staying with you. Is your place bed bug free? Leak free?
Well, I would hope so.
I'm kidding. I trust Julia. You gotta go with a loco.
Yeah. I've been living here for 2 years now, so I'm like, I can almost qualify as a local. Maybe another year. By the time you get here, I'll know all the spots.
I'd love to explore Brooklyn. I wanted to explore more. I didn't have time last time, and also I didn't want to get lost. I didn't know where to go. So I'd love for you to take me around, and also, other parts of New York as well. Love to be back.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do it. It's happening 2022 when I'm in the States. I'm going to go see you.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
And then Lily and Julia food waste cooking show will happen then.
Oh, yes. Zero waste cooking show. We'll have to plan that one out. But yes, I'm excited. Super excited.
Me too.
Yay! Okay. Well, thank you, Julia, so much for being on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing with me your honest thoughts on my podcast. And I always appreciate listener feedbacks, but thank you for being so kind enough to be honest with me and for offering so many positive feedbacks that made me feel so good about myself. Appreciate
Well,
it.
of course. You
You're so
deserve
sweet.
you deserve all of the applause, Lily.
Showering me with compliments. Oh my God. My ego is like through the roof. I mean, I already have a pretty inflated ego, so now it's about to burst. But to calm myself down. Yeah, I had such an amazing time chatting with you. I love talking to you as always. And I hope that you'll be back on my podcast to share, food waste strategies.
That'd be fun. Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Lily. It was wonderful to spend the evening with you, and I had so much fun.
Oh, me too. I had so much fun talking to you as well. All right. Well, listeners, that's it for this episode. Be sure to check out Julia's sustainability newsletter, Trash Talk, and be sure to follow her on Instagram. Can I attach her Instagram?
Yeah, sure. Send me a message if you want to follow me. I don't accept requests from people I don't know. So that's my only little thing.
She's picky. Well, that's good. You got to protect your privacy. So yeah, be sure to get in touch with Julia, check out her newsletters, and I will see you in the next episode.
Woohoo!
Yay!